You're sitting there right now, maybe in front of your charts, maybe scrolling through another trading course you just bought, and somewhere in the back of your mind there's this quiet question that won't leave you alone. Why isn't this working yet? You've studied the patterns, you've watched the videos, you've taken notes. You understand support and resistance better than most people who've been doing this for years. You know what a proper risk-reward ratio looks like. You can explain market structure in your sleep. And yet, when you look at your account balance, when you look at your recent trades, something still isn't clicking. The knowledge is there. The understanding is there. But the profits aren't following, and that gap between what you know and what you're actually producing is starting to feel heavier every single day. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. More knowledge isn't going to fix this. I know that's hard to hear, especially if you've been telling yourself that you just need one more strategy, one more confirmation, one more piece of information before everything falls into place. But if I'm being honest with you, and I think you already know this deep down, the problem was never about what you don't know. It was never about missing some secret indicator or some special technique that the profitable traders are keeping from you. The problem is happening in the space between knowing what to do and actually doing it. That space is where most traders live their entire careers, and it's a psychological space, not an educational one. Think about the last trade you took that you knew you shouldn't have taken. Not the one that lost money by bad luck, but the one where you broke your own rules. Maybe you entered late because you were afraid of missing out. Maybe you moved your stop loss because you couldn't handle being wrong. Maybe you risked too much because you were trying to recover from yesterday's loss. In that moment, did you not know what the right thing to do was? Of course you knew, but you didn't do it. And that's the entire point. Knowledge didn't fail you. You had the knowledge. What failed was your ability to execute that knowledge under emotional pressure. This is the part where most traders start to panic, because if more knowledge isn't the answer, then what is? And that panic itself is part of the problem. We've been trained our entire lives to believe that education solves problems. Study harder, learn more, prepare better, and success will follow. That works in a lot of places. It works in school. It works in many careers. But trading is different because in trading, you're not competing against information. You're competing against yourself. Every single trade is a mirror showing you exactly who you are under stress. And no amount of studying can change who you are. Only you can change that. Let me tell you what's really happening when you keep searching for more knowledge. You're using education as an emotional buffer. It feels productive. It feels like progress. When you're watching a new video or reading a new article, you're not in the market, which means you're not risking anything, which means you're not failing. Learning becomes a safe place to hide from the emotional risk of actual trading. And I'm not saying education is bad. I'm saying that at a certain point, continuing to learn is just a sophisticated form of procrastination. It's a way to avoid facing the real issue, which is that you don't trust yourself yet. You don't trust yourself to follow your plan when you're scared. You don't trust yourself to stay disciplined when you're excited. You don't trust yourself to accept a loss without spiraling. And you think that more knowledge will create that trust. But it won't. Trust comes from doing the thing you're afraid of and surviving it. Trust comes from repetition, from proving to yourself over and over that you can handle the emotional weight of this work. So what's the root of this? Why do intelligent, hardworking people keep reaching for more information when what they really need is more self-awareness? It's usually one of a few things, and if you're honest with yourself, you'll recognize which one is yours. For some people, it's fear disguised as perfectionism. You tell yourself you're not ready yet. You tell yourself you need to study just a little more before you risk real money. But really, you're terrified of being exposed as someone who doesn't have it figured out. You're terrified of failing publicly, even if that public is just you looking at your own trading journal. So you stay in the learning phase forever because as long as you're learning, you haven't failed yet. You're still preparing, you're still on your way, and that feels safer than actually stepping into the arena and finding out if you're good enough. For others, it's ego. You've invested so much time and energy into understanding the markets that you've started to identify as someone who knows things. And when your trading results don't match that identity, it creates this painful dissonance. So instead of admitting that maybe your execution needs work, maybe your emotional control needs work, you go looking for more advanced knowledge. You tell yourself the problem is that you're not trading the right setups, or you're not using the right time frame, or you're not looking at the right indicators. Because if the problem is information-based, then you're still smart. You're still competent. You just haven't found the right information yet. But if the problem is discipline, if the problem is emotional regulation, if the problem is that you can't handle losing, well, that's a much harder truth to sit with. That requires you to admit that being smart isn't enough. And for a lot of traders, that's an identity crisis they're not ready to face. Then there's impatience, which is maybe the most common one. You know what you're supposed to do. You know you're supposed to wait for your setup. You know you're supposed to let winners run. You know you're supposed to cut losses quickly. But knowing that and having the patience to actually do it are completely different things. Markets move slowly sometimes. Good setups are rare. The right trade might not show up for days. And sitting there, watching, waiting, doing nothing, it's uncomfortable. It feels like you're wasting time. It feels like you're missing opportunities. So you start taking marginal setups, trades that kind of look right, but not really, just so you feel like you're doing something. And, even as you're clicking the button, this isn't your A plus setup, but you do it anyway. Because the discomfort of waiting feels worse in that moment than the risk of taking a bad trade, and that's not a knowledge problem. That's an emotional regulation problem. Here's what happens when you start to see this clearly. You realize that the market doesn't care how much you know. It doesn't reward you for studying. It rewards you for executing. And execution is entirely psychological. It's about staying calm when everyone else is panicking. It's about being patient when everything in you wants to act. It's about accepting loss without letting it define you. It's about winning without getting overconfident. It's about showing up day after day with the same discipline, the same process, the same emotional steadiness, regardless of what happened yesterday. And none of that comes from a video or a book or a course. It comes from doing the internal work that most traders refuse to do because it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't feel like trading. Now, I want you to think about something for a second. How much time have you spent in the last month learning new strategies or techniques? And how much time have you spent reviewing your own psychology, your own emotional patterns, your own decision-making process? Most traders spend 90% of their time on knowledge and maybe 10%, if that, on self-awareness. And then they wonder why they keep making the same mistakes. You can't solve a psychological problem with an intellectual solution. You can't think your way out of fear. You can't study your way into discipline. These things require a different kind of work. The shift happens when you stop asking, "What should I learn next?" and start asking, "Why did I do that?" When you take a bad trade, instead of immediately looking for a better strategy, you pause and you ask yourself what was going on emotionally in that moment. Were you bored? Were you trying to prove something? Were you chasing a loss? Were you overconfident from a win? When you skip your journaling, instead of telling yourself you'll do it later, you ask why you're avoiding it. What are you afraid you'll see if you actually look at your patterns honestly? When you break a rule, instead of justifying it or minimizing it, you sit with the discomfort of that and you get curious about what need you were trying to meet by breaking that rule. Level of self-honesty is brutal at first, because what you're going to find is that most of your trading problems aren't trading problems at all. They're life problems showing up in your trading. If you're impatient in trading, you're probably impatient in other areas of your life. If you can't handle being wrong in a trade, you probably struggle with being wrong in conversations. If you need constant action and stimulation from the markets, you probably have that same need elsewhere. Trading doesn't create these patterns, it just reveals them. And once you see that, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. You realize that becoming a profitable trader means becoming a different version of yourself. It means growing up emotionally in ways that have nothing to do with charts or technical analysis. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because growth is slow and it's not linear and it doesn't feel like progress most of the time. You can learn a new strategy in a weekend. You can't learn emotional discipline in a weekend. That takes months, sometimes years of showing up and doing the boring, repetitive work of following your process even when it doesn't feel exciting. It takes losing trades and not spiraling. It takes winning trades and not getting cocky. It takes flat, boring days where nothing happens and still showing up the next day with the same energy. And most people aren't willing to do that. They want the shortcut. They want the hack. They want the secret that makes it all click right now. So they keep searching for more knowledge because that feels like doing something, even though deep down they know it's not the thing they actually need. Let's bring this back to something concrete. Right now, wherever you are in your trading journey, you probably have enough knowledge to be profitable. I don't know what your strategy is. I don't know what your edge is. But if you've been doing this for more than a few months, you've learned enough to know what a good trade looks like. The question isn't whether you know what to do. The question is whether you can do what you know consistently without letting your emotions hijack the process. And the only way to answer that question is to stop learning for a while and start executing. Not perfectly, not flawlessly. Just consistently. Take your trades according to your rules. Journal them. Review them. Notice your emotional patterns. Notice when you want to break a rule and get curious about why. Notice when you feel scared and trade anyway because the setup is valid. Notice when you feel confident and stay disciplined anyway instead of over-leveraging. This is the work. It's not sexy, it's not exciting. It doesn't make for good content. But it's the only thing that actually moves you from knowing to doing, from understanding to profiting. And the beautiful thing, the thing that makes all of this worth it, is that once you start doing this work, once you start seeing trading as a mirror for your psychology instead of just a way to make money, everything changes. You stop blaming the market. You stop blaming your strategy. You stop searching for the next piece of information that's going to save you. You take full responsibility for every trade, every decision, every outcome. And that responsibility, as heavy as it feels at first, is actually freedom. Because if you're responsible, that means you have control. That means you can change. That means the solution isn't out there somewhere in another course or another book. It's right here in the work you do on yourself. So where does that leave you? Sitting here, listening to this, maybe feeling a little uncomfortable because some of this hit close to home. Good. That discomfort is the beginning of awareness. And awareness is the first step toward change. You don't need more knowledge. You need more honesty. You need to stop hiding behind learning and start facing the real reasons you're not profitable yet. You need to get quiet enough to hear what your trading is trying to tell you about yourself. And you need to be brave enough to do something about it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's slow, even when there's no guarantee it'll work. The traders who make it, the ones who actually become consistently profitable, they're not the smartest people in the room. They're not the ones who know the most. They're the ones who know themselves. They're the ones who've done the hard, unglamorous work of building discipline and emotional resilience and self-trust. They're the ones who stopped searching for answers outside and started building them inside. And that's available to you too. Not through another video, not through another strategy, but through the decision to stop learning and start doing, to stop avoiding and start facing. To stop pretending knowledge is the problem when you know you've always known that the problem is you. And the solution is you too. That's the shift, that's the work. And it starts the moment you close this and decide that today, right now. You're done collecting information and you're ready to start changing yourself. Not because it's easy, not because it's fast, but because it's the only thing that's ever actually worked for anyone who's made it to the other side. You already know what to do. Now it's time to become the person who can actually do it. I hope this message found you at the right moment. If something I said today resonated with you, sit with it. Don't rush past it. The awareness you're feeling right now is valuable. It's the beginning of real change. Remember, the market will be there tomorrow. Your charts will be there tomorrow. What matters most is who you become in the process of learning to trade them. Take care of yourself. Do the work that matters. And I'll see you in the next one.